all that's happening in the world of football, building up to the new season and the transfer news as well. Dharma Sheth is here with us. I'm going to start with some news from Arsenal. How close is a deal for Riccardo Calafiori?
Good pronunciation, that, Hayley. Look at this, 35 days to go. 5 weeks today is deadline day. So clubs got to start getting a move on to get their deals done, I think. But Arsenal are making moves. We do know that Riccardo Calafiori, that deal between Arsenal and Bologna has been agreed. Good. 50 million euros all in. But it is developing today because we're expecting Calafiori in London at some point today for his Arsenal medical, all being well. And once he's completed that medical, it's expected that he will then fly to the United States of America to join the rest of the Arsenal squad because they're out there for their pre-season tour of the States. So it's getting very, very close now, this one. Everything is done club to club. Everything seems to have been done, agreed in principle, club to player. It's now just the formalities of the medical, signing off on those personal terms, and then Calafiori will be an Arsenal player. OK, what about outgoings from Arsenal then? A fair few homegrown talents have been linked with moves away from the club, haven't they? Yeah, so we're talking about Calafiori potentially going to the United States. A player who's still there with the Arsenal squad is Emile Smith-Rowe. He is still waiting for that full agreement between Arsenal and Fulham over a deal that's worth around £35 million. We think it's an initial £27 million that Fulham will pay, plus £8 million in performance-related add-ons. But he's just waiting for that final agreement between the two clubs because all sorts of talks have to take place with a big deal like that. It's a Fulham club transfer record. It would be a record sale, equaling record sale for Arsenal. So he's just sitting tight at the moment. He was kept out of any action for their first pre-season game against Bournemouth the other night. Once he gets that permission, once that full agreement is made, it's expected he'll fly from the US back to London for a medical with Fulham. They actually fly out next week for a pre-season training camp in Portugal, and it hasn't been ruled out Emile Smith-Rowe may still play a part in that pre-season training camp. As far as a couple of other players are concerned at Arsenal, Reiss Nelson and Eddie Nketiah. Let's start with Eddie Nketiah. He's been linked with a move to Marseille. However, there is a big gap in valuation between what Arsenal want for Eddie Nketiah and what Marseille are prepared to pay. Remember, Marseille managed now by Roberto De Zerbi. They've already made a couple of signings from the Premier League in this transfer window. Now we're just waiting to see if Marseille are going to focus on other targets or if indeed they're going to go back to Arsenal with an improved offer that may make Arsenal turn their head with regard to Nketiah. He's played in their first pre-season game against Bournemouth. So as far as Arsenal are concerned, he remains an Arsenal player until they get a deal that is suitable for the player, but more importantly, the club as well. Reiss Nelson is another player who did feature in that game against Bournemouth. We're told, and we've been saying throughout the window, that he wants to assess all of his options because the primary motivation for Reiss Nelson, for Nketiah, for Emile Smith-Rowe is regular first-team football, which they're not seemingly going to get at Arsenal, even though Mikel Arteta did praise the attitude of Reiss Nelson and Nketiah during that game against Bournemouth. We know that Leicester City have been in talks with Arsenal over a potential deal. West Ham United have shown interest during this transfer window as well. As yet, no formal offer, but we expect that one to maybe accelerate a little bit more once the US tour with Arsenal is over in a week. Manchester United, we're talking about Wan-Bissaka, seems to be a bit of a domino effect happening here. They were interested in Mazraoui, and we are told that talks are ongoing between Manchester United and Bayern Munich over this man, Noussair Mazraoui. So let's see where that develops to. However, I'm talking about this domino effect. We've always said that Manchester United are doing due diligence on various positions, but they need to create squad space and budgets to be able to pursue these deals. And so Aaron Wan-Bissaka is actually key to what Manchester United can do. He's into the final year of his contract at United. There are no talks planned as it stands over extending that contract. And so effectively they are listening to offers. There have been interested parties. I've mentioned West Ham United already, but he is key now to whether Manchester United can go into the market to bring in another right back. But they don't want to be in a position whereby, say, Aaron Wan-Bissaka leaves and it comes as a surprise to them, because they don't want to just say, oh, we better go and buy someone, they have to do due diligence on various right-backs. And they've done it with Vanderson from Monaco. They've done it for Bayer Leverkusen's Jeremy Frimpong as well. So in the instance that Aaron Wan-Bissaka is to leave, they can immediately go to whichever player they want to pursue, which includes Noussair Mazraoui now of Bayern Munich. So it's an interesting situation that Manchester United have got here. We're told that Aaron Wan-Bissaka, even though he's aware of West Ham United's interest, as recently as a few days ago, wants to explore all of his options. One of those options could have been Inter Milan, because there were informal talks between intermediaries and the clubs about a potential swap deal that would see Aaron Wan-Bissaka go to Inter Milan and Denzel Dumfries come to Manchester United. That was around 10 days ago. That hasn't been revisited since, but revisiting those talks, I'm told, has not been ruled out. But the big news in the past few minutes, it's been confirmed to us that West Ham's move for Bayern Munich's right-back, Noussair Mazraoui, has now broken down, and Manchester United are in talks with Bayern Munich over that very player.
Yeah, and we talked about this yesterday, didn't we, Domish, about how Manchester United, especially with Dan Ashworth now in post, more strategic, more in control of the transfer window, don't seem to be drawn into long old transfer sagas over one player, seem to have plan A, plan B, and thinking about things, you know, more in a strategic way. And D, C and D, yeah. What about options at left back for Manchester United? What can you tell us?
From the outset of this transfer window, we were talking about a centre-back for United. Lenny Yoro's coming. We were talking about a forward. Joshua Zirkzee has come in. We were talking about the fullback positions, but that was providing a player left in that position. The left-back area is slightly different because they are looking at players in that position only because of what happened last season. You had long-term injuries to Luke Shaw. He was in and out of that team because of injuries, but also Tyrell Malacia was out for the entire season. And he's actually not gone on the US tour because he's still recovering from what kept him out for the entire of last season. Hence why he's been kept back at the Carrington Training Complex, working with the medical team back in Manchester just to get him right for the new season. So United, with all of that in mind, are looking at other options. Genk's Archie Brown is one, the former Derby County player. Feyenoord's David Hanko is another. Crystal Palace's Tyreek Mitchell is a player that they've looked at. Sergio Reguilon as well. And we do know that he was actually on loan at Manchester United for the first half of last season, but they had that clause where they could return him to Tottenham, which they ended up doing. And I don't know whether they regretted that in the end because of Luke Shaw's injury problems in the second half of the season as well. And they ended up having to play the likes of Aaron Wan-Bissaka at left back and players out of position in that position. They don't want to be caught short again. Hence why they're doing lots of due diligence, as is in keeping with the new structure at Manchester United, so that in case a player was to leave, like Aaron Wan-Bissaka, in case they see that Malacia may be out for longer than they expect, they can bring somebody in and it will kind of be more seamless than it has been over the past season or so.
Yeah, and with almost a month to go till deadline day, it is United who are dominating this window, and a lot of focus as well on their midfield. So what about potentials, ins and outs there in that department?
It's a common theme. I've been mentioning what's happening in the right-back area, and it's all to do with budgets and squad space. So Manchester United need money, and they need to create squad space in particular areas if they want to go into the market. So, for example, in midfield, throughout the window, we've been talking about Casemiro. We've been talking about Scott McTominay. Actively not looking to sell, publicly not looking to sell, but if good enough deals did come in, then they would be considered. We're told that the Saudi interest, which was quite strong earlier in the window, was somewhat cooled in Casemiro. That could be reignited. There's still 5 weeks to go in the window, of course. Scott McTominay is definitely one to watch. We know that Fulham went in earlier in this window, £17 million bid, rejected out of hand. We expect them to go back in. They're discussing internally behind the scenes at Fulham what their next move is going to be with regard to Scott McTominay. And as I mentioned before with the right-backs, Manchester United don't want to be left short if they suddenly see a deal that they can't refuse for McTominay. They don't want to think, well, who are we going to bring in? Because they are now doing due diligence on various players should someone like Scott McTominay leave the club. So dialogue remains open with Paris Saint-Germain over Manuel Ugarte, the Uruguay international midfielder. Big gap in valuation between what Manchester United are prepared to pay, what PSG want. But the player himself is thought to be keen on the move. Paris Saint-Germain want to do the deal, but I don't think Manchester United will be wanting to do a deal at the prices that they want to do. If they are willing to compromise, United will return to the table. There are other players that Manchester United are looking at in the central midfield area. Youssouf Fofana from Monaco is one. Sofiane Amrabat is a name that won't go away. We know he was on loan last season. There was an option to buy him for 20 million euros. United don't want to spend that much, but they're in talks with Fiorentina, potentially about bringing that price down. And then there's another new name that's been mentioned to me, Real Sociedad's Martin Zubimendi as well, the Spain international. So all of these names Manchester United are looking at, they're doing due diligence on, they're working on. The ideal scenario with what United want to do in this window is get deals agreed in principle or as far down the line as they can, so that if a player was to leave, like Aaron Wan-Bissaka, like Scott McTominay, or somebody else in another position, they can act very quickly and proactively with work that they've done on various targets and then bring players in before the season starts and before the window finishes.